I'm Brian McGee from the College of Charleston. We're here today with Envision, South Carolina. We are talking to leading business people, philanthropists, professionals, people from all walks of life who can speak to what can make South Carolina a world-class state in every respect. I'm joined today by John Rivers. John is a businessman, a philanthropist, a leader in every respect here in Charleston. John, it's a pleasure to be with you today.
Well, thank you.
Let me begin right off the top by asking a question of you as a native Charlestonian. Some people like me came to Charleston as an adult, but you've been here your entire life in one fashion or another. How do you think Charleston and South Carolina are different for those of you who grew up here as opposed to those folks like me who moved to Charleston as an adult?
Well, there are so many differences. People often say that have lived here for a while say they'd like to go back to the old Charleston. Mm-hmm. But really, I don't think they have thought that through, because when I was growing up, we were hardly ever allowed to go north of Broad Street because of the dilapidated buildings, the crime, the uncertainty of whatever our fate might be as we went further north in the city. Today, the city is so vibrant. Areas that we were told never to set foot in are being renewed. To me, being here today is sort of like being in springtime. It's a time for renewal, but it's also a time where history is repeating itself, and that Charleston 250 years ago was the wealthiest place in America. And frankly, I don't see any reason why we can't have history repeat itself today. We have, the natural resources to do so. We have the College of Charleston. We have a burgeoning medical school, the best natural port on the East Coast, and just so many things that we can take advantage of. And with the proper leadership and desire on the part of the citizens who live here, this really is, in my opinion, springtime for the next 200 years.
But as a real estate developer and businessman, you and your team at Rivers Enterprises have been central to that renewal north of Broad Street. You've made some very big commitments north of Broad Street. What led you to think that Charleston was worth that risk?
Well, I guess the big thing is that a sense of optimism and perhaps a sense of history, in realizing how great we were at one time and how great we can be. And I think you're being very generous in your compliments, but thank you. But somebody has to be a catalyst. Somebody has to be the spark that ignites the excitement of others to get things going. And when the Navy base closed here in Charleston, there was a move afoot. It was called the Building Economic Strength Together Commission. We thought, on the other hand, that maybe the Charleston Regional Development Alliance could have a better idea as to what to do, and taking advantage of the natural resources and not looking back at just what the strength of the Navy Yard and its history and importance was to the community, but look at all the other opportunities that we had. And so I think that's why we went forward with that vision. Instead of trying to go back to something, we were all looking forward to what the opportunities could be for the future.
We've been talking about Charleston for a few moments, but let's take the entire state of South Carolina. If you were giving us your top level impression as a whole, how would you describe South Carolina to someone who didn't know the state well as a prospective investor, and you were trying to differentiate South Carolina from other states in the Southeast or anywhere in the United States for that matter?
Well, to be real simple, South Carolina is the best.
Okay.
And we have so many things that are good here, and we are often portrayed as a bozo state. And a lot of the negative things that happen in our state are the things that get publicized, but little things like that are really huge things, like the quality of education offered by the College of Charleston, offered by Clemson, offered by our medical university as examples. I mean, there really is nothing finer. And what we need to do, in my humble opinion, is that we need to focus our resources and use a rifle shot instead of a shotgun approach as to how we do things. And we need to build clusters of excellence. And again, taking Clemson as an example as to what they've done with their iCar project, and look at what Greer has gotten with the BMW plant. And that's a wonderful example of what can be done economically. Looking at the University of South Carolina and its aerospace and what they're doing. Look at what we're doing here in cancer research at the Medical University and the different biodiversity that's taking place out of there. Look at what's happened to the College of Charleston and the quality of students that we've attracted. And when we're taking, I think, 1 out of every 7 applicants, and back in the late 1960s, when Ted Stern took the college from being a private municipal college into being a state-supported college, we were begging students to come here. And now we only take 1 out of every 7, and we've got the highest SAT scores, I think, tied with Clemson, of any college that's in the state. So it's really terrific.
You started to answer my next question, because you've talked about things that we're doing really well now as a state. How do you see that as part of a transition from a state that was more agrarian or that had a really sort of an old traditional manufacturing base to a different kind of state, one that's on the cutting edge in manufacturing or that's developing new technologies?
To be honest with you, I'm not sure that I'm really qualified to answer that question, but I can see where we have some structural deficiencies that I think need to be corrected. And the biggest one that we have, the biggest 2 we have, are in the organization of our state government. For example, in the State Department of Education, that should not be an elected position, because there are hundreds, if not thousands, of people that work for the State Department of Education whose main job is to get the superintendent reelected. That should be a cabinet position. There are other elected positions that should be, in my opinion, under a cabinet position. And now we're seeing where the governor and the lieutenant governor are going to be running on the same ticket as opposed to separately. So there are structural changes that need to take place there. Additionally, we need to increase our focus on education. And we need to forget this idea of separatism of the low country versus the upstate versus the Midlands, or Clemson versus South Carolina, or the medical university as research universities competing for research dollars. I mean, we need to work together. Our Commission on Higher Education needs to be focused on the offerings from our various colleges. We don't need 3 or 4 medical schools in this state. We can't afford it. But we also need to be cognizant of the fact that, as you mentioned, from the rural or agrarian areas, what do we do with those areas now that is different than what we've done in the past 30 or 40 years? And one of the huge things that's taking place today is the locavore, or the farm-to-table concept. And that's all fits into sustainability and into the kind of things that we're doing farm to table, where what would be better food to serve in our Charleston restaurants or Greenville restaurants than food that's grown right here in South Carolina.
Let's talk a bit about North Carolina and South Carolina. You know both states really well. You went to college in North Carolina, even though you're a native Charlestonian. What do you see as lessons South Carolina could learn from North Carolina, and vice versa?
Well, first of all, I would not claim to know either one really well, but
you're a pretty modest guy here today, John.
No, well, anyway, but I have had exposure to both. What I would say is in North Carolina, that they have been much more progressive and supportive of their educational system, primary, secondary, higher education. Look at their research universities and what they're doing. Look at their research triangle, what they're doing. Look at their consolidated approach, particularly to higher education. I think that that's fantastic. We don't have that here. We don't have a consolidated approach to higher education. On the other hand, North Carolina, one of its biggest deficiencies, in my opinion, is their underutilization of their educational television system. They have separate educational systems, educational television systems spotted throughout the state. In South Carolina, we have a consolidated educational television system. And I was fortunate enough to be chairman of educational television, and when I was, immodestly I'll tell you, we had the highest usage in primary, secondary, and higher education. We even beat some of the commercial stations with some of the programming that we are doing. But I was replaced as the chair, and not because I was replaced, but the lack of focus on educational television took place simultaneous with that, and our educational system has suffered. And most of the people that are connected with overseeing ETV, SC, and ERN don't realize the fact that with the facilities that we have at ETV, we can put out 1,100 hours of programming per day. Per day, 1,100 hours, which is more than CBS, ABC, NBC, CNN, all of the networks combined. And so we've got the pipeline and the ability to do it. And what I wanted to do, frankly, was out of the box and crazy, but to dump PBS. And was told that we couldn't do that because of Louis Rukeyser and Wall Street Week. Well, unfortunately, I think he passed away, 2 or 3 years after I made that initial suggestion. So they lost Wall Street Week anyway. But we had an opportunity to set up a whole new business of providing educational programming originated in South Carolina using our educational facilities like the College of Charleston, like the University of South Carolina, like Clemson, like Francis Marion, like University of South Carolina in Beaufort, in Salkehatchie, in Florence, in York, and where we were actually doing a program called Que-Pasa for the Mexican government. But we could, use the different resources and regions of our state and then feed them into the heart, which would be in Columbia, and then commit those programs and ideas to not only other parts of the state, but because of technology throughout the world. Give you just one quick prime example. We started a program called the Black History Teleconference, and it was to be broadcast in Columbia, and it was. And it was not my idea, it was Dr. Mariah Anna Davis from Benedict College. And it is now a program that we nurtured when I was there as the chair, and I believe it's in 135 countries around the world.
So I'm guessing when you see budget cuts to educational television and you see their mission being scaled back because of those financial shortfalls, that you don't think that's a good idea?
I think it's a horrible idea. And I know there was a move afoot to try and sell the spectrum that is used by educational television to private resources, but that can't happen because that is allocated to public education. And the problem is that it's not being utilized. And there is no better way, for example, to reach all 46 sheriff's departments in the state than through the technical facilities of educational television. And you could do it less expensively, and think of all the drive time and the hours that it takes for people to come to training sessions in Columbia, when you can be in Columbia and be sending that information to somebody in Lexington or Anderson or Beaufort or Walterboro or Aiken or any other part of the state. So, and you can use that for training, for teachers, for medical training in rural communities that can all be originated in different parts of the state and ultimately fed through Columbia, but it doesn't have to originate in Columbia, and then it can go to other parts of the state. So I think we can actually, if we're really smart about our reorganization, we can take the information that we have, use the technology we have, and leapfrog this abyss that we seem to find ourselves in when people criticize us for our lack of education in South Carolina. And I mean, look at what you've got going here at the College of Charleston. Not many people know it, I don't think, but that our School of the Arts here at the college put out 277 different programs each year in the arts. Mm-hmm. Now, wouldn't that be wonderful if we could share that with everybody, every citizen in the state? I think that there are a lot of people who would enjoy that. But who would have thought that the College of Charleston is putting out in the School of the Arts alone 277 products that are their opera, their symphony, their Broadway type plays, their original plays. There are just all kinds of things that come out of there that I think that other people would enjoy. And it's not only there, it could be participation in Spoleto, it's the scientific activities that are taking place at the Fort Johnson Laboratory, it could be the collaborative efforts that Clemson and the Medical University are having at the Medical University here with College of Charleston and Clemson, what's happening at the Restoration Institute. I mean, they're just all kinds of things. We're limited only by our imagination.
John, great topic, but I'd like to shift to a new one. Sure. You've not only been a successful business leader and entrepreneur and visionary for this community in your business career, but you've also been a leading philanthropist and volunteer. Could you talk to me a bit about how you see philanthropy and volunteerism being something that should be important to the future of the state and an area where giving back is essential?
Well, I do think it's essential. I think that a community is only as good as the people who live in that community. And I was always raised with the idea that to whom much has been given, much is expected, and expected to give back in return what we received. And I always am looking for ways that I can be more philanthropic. And unfortunately, I can't do all the things that I want to do. But you know, really going back to what I said originally, people make the place. And you know, so a person has got to make a decision. Is it better to support the symphony or an arts program or scientific research at the Medical University, for example, or building a park or a greenway? Or is it better to do that or to engage in what I call self-indulgence and have a 160-foot yacht that's got a crew of 16 or how many staterooms or how many G5 airplanes that you have? And you know, that's a personal decision, but you know, my personal position is that I think I should live within certain parameters and not do everything that I can do just because I can do it, but I've got to look beyond myself. And that's what I teach my children, that you know, they're the old cliche, the letter I is not in the word we or in the word us or in the word our. And that I think it's really important that everybody who has the ability to invest in their community make that investment.
Well, let's go back full circle to where we started. Thinking about the future and how South Carolina can respond to its opportunities in K-12 education, in higher education, in the arts, in making opportunities for learning available statewide, in terms of better facilitating economic development all throughout the state. What do you think our prospects are for moving the state forward and becoming world-class in every respect, the envy of all the other states and a global player? It's a big question, I know. That
is a big question, but I think basically it all starts with leadership. And the tone that that leadership sets for the rest of the state. And in today's environment, that really has got to come from our legislative branch. And we set up, you know, back in 1875 when Wade Hampton brought order to chaos after the Civil War with a weak governor and a strong legislature so that we would never presumably, or the state would never have a minority in a position of leadership. But I think it goes back to the idea of restructuring our state government and getting our state government to set the tone for what the priorities of the state should be. And once that's set at the state level, I think that each community needs to set its own goals and objectives. And the goals and objectives of Greenville for that particular region may be different than the goals and objectives that are set in Charleston or Spartanburg or Florence or Aiken. However, all of those need to be knitted together as part of the fabric that will let us accomplish the goals that are set up by the governor and the two legislative branches that we have. But to me, that's where it all starts. I think we have the natural resources, the physical natural resources here. The big thing to me is to be able to attract the intellectual capital and the real financial capital that we need to really to grow. But where we're headed right now with, again, using Boeing, using BMW as examples, we have opportunities that no other state has. And because of our history of really not having capital and not making a lot of mistakes that other states made in the last 100 years, I think we somewhat have a fresh canvas to paint on. And if we can get our priorities straight and be sensitive to our environmental needs and create an environment that will attract that intellectual capital and the investment capital, that I think our potential really is unlimited. So bottom line, I'm very optimistic about what's happening, and that, you know, we've got I think somebody told me 26 suppliers from Boeing that want to relocate here. That would be huge. We have a world-class symphony hall and performance hall that is under construction right now. That means that our children won't have to go to Carnegie Hall to hear the best. What we will have will be better than Carnegie Hall. Certainly no worse, but I'm saying it'll be better than Carnegie Hall. So it's important, you know, to be sensitive and to be mindful of our history, but we should use that as a springboard to launch us into making history for the future, but doing it in the right way. And again, I go back to what I said, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do it. You need to be able to do whatever that is in a responsible way. So, you know, would it be right to come into Charleston now and build a 60-story building or a 100-story building and try to build the biggest building in the world? You know, to me, absolutely not. But if we're sensitive to what brought so many people here to begin with and the historic charm of the city, then I think that we can take that, not ruin our quality of life, but enhance our quality of life by bringing people here that will make this a better place to live.
Great. John, as you look back at your life, could you talk about what your most formative and memorable experiences were here in South Carolina?
When I look back on my very earliest days, I remember how much fun I had, you know, playing in the parks. But I didn't know it at the time. I didn't realize I wasn't getting a good education. And I didn't realize as a 7, 8, 9, 10, 13, 14-year-old how important education would be to the rest of my life. And my parents sent me off to school, even though I was an excellent student here, and I thought I was, you know, doing pretty well. But I can give you a great example. I was at a private school here doing well academically, and my parents sent me off to Choate School in Wallingford, Connecticut, where the passing was 60 and the honor roll was 80. And I said, this is going to be a breeze, because I've been making 90s, and I mean, I can't make an 80. Certainly I can make an 80. and be on the honor roll. So the first test I was given was a math test, and I was very fortunate. I made 100 on that test. And I said, this is really going to be simple. But then I was asked to write a composition, and I wrote the composition and got the grade back. I couldn't believe it. I got a 20. And so that was a real eye-opener to me. And I was then thrown into a whole different set of boys at that time that had so much more knowledge about the world. They had so much more knowledge about books, about writing, travel. And I realized that even though I thought that I was reasonably well educated, I wasn't well educated at all. And so that, to me, was the real eye-opening experience. And that's why I feel like, education is so important. That's why I took on the job as chairman of educational television. And I was an educational television commissioner for, I think it was 14 years, and then chairman for 4 years. And I always said, if a child is only ridden a dirt bike on a back road in South Carolina, but never seen the Concorde or a supersonic plane fly, I mean, they'll never know what it's like to fly a jet airplane. And so maybe Ron McNair, who was our great South Carolinian astronaut from Lake City, if maybe he happened to see ETV, and maybe he saw something that sparked his interest in aviation. And but distance education and education, I think, is just so critical, and it just is a total anathema to me why our politicians don't put that as the absolute #1 priority for everything we do in this state. Whatever we're doing, what is it doing to enhance education? What is it doing to enhance intellectual capital? What is it doing to use that intellectual capital to improve the quality of life of everyone in this state?
John, knowing what you know, what advice would you give to young South Carolinians today?
Well, it depends on what age group. The very young ones, I would say read. Learn to read, and read every day. Read every night. Get your parents to read to you. Read to your parents.
Does the internet count?
No, I'm going to it could be ebooks, or it could be books, but the whole idea is to read. The second thing I would advise young people to do is to follow their passion, whatever that passion may be. And so that would be it. As far as the internet is concerned, I think that's an incredibly useful tool if it is utilized properly. But it is like anything else. It could be misused. And having been in the television business, I remember that television was blamed for crime. It was blamed for all kinds of the ills of the world. But little did people realize that when books were assigned that were shown on television, like remember The Corn is Green, that which nobody had ever heard of, the reading comprehension went up dramatically. The reading interest went up dramatically. So, and I just taught a group of kindergarten students about Antarctica. And the research material that was available on the internet about Antarctica was fascinating to me, but more importantly, it was fascinating to the children. And part of the teaching was to teach them how to use the internet responsibly to learn about a subject that they wanted to learn about. So, but to use the internet to go find out what I don't want to use, what a certain celebrity might be wearing or eating, or what issues they've had in dealing with the law, gossip, that kind of stuff, I don't think is useful. A little bit of it may be entertaining, but to be obsessed with it, I think is all wrong. And so I don't let my children do that, and I'm trying to teach them to follow their passions, to be good citizens, to have good manners, and to try at whatever they do. So that would be advice to young people.
A great list.
Envision South Carolina, world class, globally connected.